Satyaki shot an arrow that resembled fire in its splendor, striking summoned at his chest. The mighty Kar warrior fell to the ground, defeated by the combined efforts of Bhema and Satyaki. His son Valaka rushed towards Satyaki, scattering arrows like a stormy cloud. But Bhema was not to be swayed. He pierced Valaka with 9 shafts, sending him into a soul. The battle continued unabated, with Bhema facing off against 10 of Duryodhana's sons, each as powerful as Rama, the son of Dasaratha. The air was filled with the sound of clashing steel and the cries of the fallen. Bhema took up his bow and shot arrows at each of them, striking their vital parts, and by one the sons of Duryodhana fell to the ground like tall trees broken by a tempest. Bhema's fury knew no bounds as he showed the favorite son of Karna with arrows. The celebrated Vrakra, the brother of Karna, tried to pierce Bhema, but was soon dispatched. A mighty Pandava then turned his attention to Satyakendra, slaying 7 Kar warriors and pressing him down into the earth. Unable to bear this loss, Satyakai's brothers rushed towards Bhemesna, attacking him with their keen shafts, but Bhema was a force to be reckoned with. He slew these 5 mighty kings with just 5 swift arrows. The sight of so many warriors falling sent shockwaves through Duryodhana's army, causing many great kings to waver. Meanwhile, Yudhishthira, filled with wrath, began to destroy the enemy ranks in the sight of his father and brothers with his shafts. He dispatched the Amashas, Malavas, Trigartas, Sivas, Avishahas, Shurasnas, Valaikas, and Vasadas to the sun was saying over the vast battlefield, casting a golden glow over the assembled armies of the Kuras and the Pandavas. Duryodhana, the eldest son of Dhritarashtra, stood tall on his chariot, his eyes blazing with determination as he gazed out at the enemy lines. His friend Karna, the Suta's son, stood by his side, a fierce gleam in his eye. Behold, O Karna! Duryodhana exclaimed, "This is the moment we have been waiting for. The hour of our triumph has finally arrived. Our enemies are numerous and strong, but I know that with your help we will emerge victorious. Save me from this sea of foes." My friend Karna's face lit up with a fierce enthusiasm as he replied, "I swear to you, O Duryodhana, that I will vanquish the sons of Pandu in battle and give you the victory. I will slay Arjuna, the greatest warrior among them, and all his brothers will either surrender or flee in terror. You will be the master of the earth, unopposed and unconquerable." But just as Karna's words were dripping with confidence, a voice cut through the air, questioning his boasts. It was Kripa, the wise old Brahmana, who had been watching the scene. Unfold at Karna, Kripa said, "Your words are like autumnal clouds, full of sound and fury, but lacking in substance. You have never faced Arjuna in battle without fleeing, and yet you claim to be able to vanquish him. Now I fear that your boasts are nothing more than a mask for your own weakness." Karna's face darkened with anger as he replied, "You do not understand me, O Kripa. I am not like the autumnal clouds, which bring only rain and destruction. I am a hero, a mighty warrior who will vanquish my enemies and emerge victorious. You may doubt my words, but mark well the outcome of this battle, for it will prove my prowess." Kripa's eyes narrowed as he replied, "I fear that you are deluding yourself, Karna. The sons of Pandu are not to be underestimated. Arjuna is a great warrior, and with Krishna by his side he is almost invincible. And what of Yudhishthira, the son of Dharma? He is a just and truthful king who has earned the respect of all the gods. How can you hope to vanquish such foes?" Karna's smile returned as he replied, "I will not be swayed by your doubts, O Kripa. I am determined to emerge victorious, and I will not rest until I have vanquished my enemies and claimed the earth for Duryodhana. Mark well the outcome of this battle, for in the midst of the great war, a fierce confrontation unfolded between Aswathaman, Drawa's son, and Karna. The Suta's son Aswathaman, fueled by anger and pride, hurled harsh words at Karna, calling him the lowest of men and boasting of his own prowess in battle. He accused Karna of being envious of Arjuna's virtues and of harboring wicked intentions. Karna, unfazed by the insults, stood tall, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination. He declared that he would not be swayed by Aswathaman's words, and that he was more than capable of vanquishing Arjuna in battle. The king himself, Duryodhana, intervened, pleading with Aswathaman to forgive Karna and quell his wrath. As the confrontation continued, the Pandavas, led by Arjuna, approached the battlefield, their 1,000-strong army at their command. The sound of drums and conches echoed through the air as they charged towards Karna, who stood firm, drawing his bow and relying on his own strength. The battle that ensued was a spectacle to behold, with arrows flying in all directions and warriors clashing in a frenzy of steel. Karna Like a lion among men fought valiantly, his arrows piercing through the enemy ranks like a storm. He unleashed a torrent of shafts, each one marked with his own name, striking down steeds, elephants, and warriors. Alike the field of battle became a sea of blood and death as Karna's enemies fell before him. Meanwhile Duryodhana, witnessing Karna's prowess, turned to Aswathaman and urged him to take action against Arjuna, who was approaching with his army. Behold Karna, clad in mail as he engaged with all the hostile kings. He said, "Let us prevent the son of Pandu from slaying that mighty Kar warrior." Aswathaman, along with Drona's son and other great warriors, advanced against Arjuna to protect Karna. But Arjuna, undeterred by their attempts to stop him, pressed forward, his eyes fixed on Karna. Like a lion stalking its prey, the battle raged on, with each side trading blows, and neither gaining the upper hand. The air was filled with the sound of drums, conches, and clashing steel, as the warriors clashed in a frenzy of violence, and at the center of it all stood Karna, his bow drawn, his arrows flying like a storm, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination to emerge victorious. This maelstrom of war where heroes rose and fell, Karna stood tall, his name etched on every arrow that flew from his bow. He was the embodiment of courage and strength, a warrior without equal in the annals of time. And as that the sun beat down upon the battlefield, as Duryodhana, the eldest of the Kaurava princes, stood before his brother-in-law Aswathaman, the latter's eyes blazed with a fierce determination, his mind set on destroying their enemies. The Pandavas, so descendant of Kuru, Aswathaman began, "The Pandavas are always dear to both myself and my father, so also are we both dear unto them. But in battle we will not hold back. We will fight with all our might, reckless of our lives." He paused for a moment before continuing, his voice dripping with conviction. "Myself, Karnasalya, Kripa, and Hridika's son could destroy the Pandava host within the twinkling of an eye. The Pandavas also could do the same to us. If we were not present in battle, we are fighting for our sake as well as yours, O King." Aswathaman's words hung in the air like a challenge. Duryodhana listened intently, his eyes fixed on Aswathaman's face. He knew that his brother-in-law was a formidable warrior, one who would stop at nothing to achieve victory, and yet Duryodhana felt a twinge of unease. Was Aswathaman truly loyal to him and the Kauravas? If sensing Duryodhana's doubts, Aswathaman pressed on, his words dripping with venom. "You are exceedingly covetous, O king. You are deceitful, vainglorious, and suspicious of everything. For this you suspect even us." He spat the words out like a curse. Duryodhana's face darkened, but Aswathaman continued, his voice rising in a crescendo. "I will fight with the foe and slay a large number of the enemy. I will fight with the Panchalas, the Samikas, the Kakyas, and the Pandayas also, for doing what is agreeable to you, O Chastisarif." His words were like a battle cry, summoning the warriors to join him in his quest for victory. With that, Aswathaman set off towards the battlefield, his heart ablaze with determination. He was a force to be reckoned with, and all who saw him trembled with fear. The Panchalas and Samikas poured showers of arrows upon him, like clouds pouring torrents of rain, but he baffled their attack with ease. Yama, the son of Prishatta, rushed forward to confront Aswathaman. "O foolish son of the preceptor," Yama taunted, "what is the use of slaying vulgar combatants? If thou art a hair fight with me in battle." His words were like a challenge. The battle-scared landscape of Kurukshetra trembled as the Pandavas, led by King Yudhishthira and Bhima, son of Pandu, encircled Drona's son on all sides. The air was electric with tension as the two armies faced off in a clash that would shake the very foundations of the earth. As the encounter began, King Duryodhana, aided by his mentor Bharadwaja's son, charged forward against the Pandavas. The battle raged on, its fury and ferocity sending shivers down the spines of even the bravest warriors. Yudhishthira, his anger burning like a wildfire, unleashed a maelstrom of arrows upon the enemy lines, cutting down entire clans. They amashed as Malevas, Vengyas, Sivas, and Trigartas, leaving their souls to depart for the realm of the dead. Bhima, his massive frame radiating fury, tore through the ranks of the Abhishahas, Shurasnas, and other formidable Kshatriyas, sending them crashing to the ground like autumn leaves before a raging storm. The earth itself seemed to writhe in agony as the mighty Bhima trampled the fallen warriors beneath his feet, their blood mingling with the dust to create a merry landscape of death. Meanwhile Arjuna, his chariot decked with white steeds unleashed a devastating barrage upon the enemy lines. His arrows sliced through the ranks of the Yodes mountaineers, Madrikas and Nalevas, sending them tumbling into the afterlife. The once majestic elephants, now crippled by swift shafts, crashed to the ground like Titans fallen from the skies as the battle reached its crescendo. Drona, his rage a tempest raging within him, unleashed the Vaidya weapon upon his foes. His arrows sliced through the Panchala ranks like scythes cutting through wheat, sending them fleeing in terror before Bhima and Arjuna's very eyes. The two Pandava brothers, their bond unbreakable, rallied their troops and charged forward with a fierce cry. Vivatsu Arjuna targeted Drona's right flank, while Vrakadara attacked his left, unleashing a torrent of arrows that threatened to end off the Emilinas. The Srinjayas, Panchalas, Matsyas, and Samakas joined forces with Arjuna and Bhima, forming a phalanx of steel that pushed forward against Drona's unyielding defenses. Meanwhile, Duryodhana's own troops, their morale shattered by the relentless onslaught, began to break ranks as the battle raged on. King Duryodhana himself and his mentor Drona tried to rally their flagging forces. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Satyaki, a skilled warrior from the Vrishai clan, gazed at Samadaya, his arch-nemesis. I will not return without slaying you. Satyaki declared to his charioteers, so that with that he urged his fleet steeds forward, their white coats glistening like conch shells as they bore him towards the enemy. Samadaya, a towering figure from the Kuru clan, stood tall, his large bow at the ready. The two warriors clashed, showering each other with arrows like autumn rain. Their chariots circled around them, racing in tandem as if driven by the gods themselves. Satyaki's arrows struck Samadaya's chest, but the Kuru warrior refused to yield. As the battle raged on, both warriors were mangled and pierced by countless arrows. They resembled two flowering Kintsukas, their beauty marred only by the blood that stained their armor. Their chariots, once sleek and polished, now bore the scars of war, their wooden frames splintered and cracked. Samadaya's bow was cut down by Satyaki with a razor-faced arrow, but he quickly retrieved another, its crescent shape glinting in the sunlight. The two warriors continued to exchange blows, their arrows flying through the air like fireflies dancing around a candle flame. Samadaya's driver fell, his head severed from his trunk by Satyaki's swift shaft. In the heat of battle, the Kuru warrior stumbled, his strength waning as he beheld his standard cut down and his steeds fleeing in terror. Satyaki seized the opportunity, striking Samadaya with 100 straight arrows, their golden wings glinting like sunlight on water. The mighty Kar warrior fell from his chariot, his body broken by the sheer force of Satyaki's onslaught. As Samadaya lay defeated, his warriors rushed to Duryodhana's aid, but they were no match for the Pandavas' might. Meanwhile, Drona, the preceptor of the Kurus, clashed with Yudhishthira, their arrows flying in a deadly dance. The son of Pritha pierced Drona with 17 arrows, but the Brahmana warrior retaliated with 5 shafts. The battle raged on, with neither side yielding an inch. Vasudeva intervened, urging Yudhishthira to leave Drona and join forces with Bhima and Arjuna against the Kurus king. Yudhishthira heeded his words, proceeding towards the fray, where Bhima clashed with the Kuru warriors. As the night descended upon the battlefield, Drona began to consume his foes like a raging fire. The Panchalas trembled before him, their numbers dwindling as the preceptor's arrows struck true. The sky was a deep shade of indigo, and the air was thick with dust. The world had descended into chaos. As the two armies clashed on the battlefield, Sanjaya, a devoted servant of King Dhritarashtra, stood amidst the mayhem, recounting the events that transpired. As the battle raged on, the combatants struggled to see one another, their visibility impaired by the thick darkness. The warriors, led by Drona and Karna, fought with reckless abandon, guided only by their intuition and the names of their enemies. The air was filled with the cacophony of clashing steel, the thunderous roars of elephants, and the screams of the fallen. The Pandavas, led by Bhima and Prisheta's son, clashed with the Kaurava forces in a frenzy of bloodless. Sanjaya described how the warriors fought with abandon, their hearts heavy with despair. The darkness seemed to amplify their emotions, rendering them vulnerable to panic and chills. As the battle reached its climax, the combatants began to flee in all directions, abandoning their posts and leaving behind the trail of carnage. Thousands of warriors fell on both sides, their bodies broken and battered by the relentless onslaught. Sanjaya's words painted a picture of utter devastation, as if the very fabric of reality had been torn apart. In the midst of this chaos, King Dhritarashtra asked Sanjaya to describe his own state of mind. During those fateful hours, Sanjaya revealed that he and the other warriors were consumed by fear and uncertainty, their senses dulled by the darkness, and their energy sapped by the relentless fighting. But as the night wore on, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon. The Kaurava forces under Duryodhana's leadership devised a plan to illuminate the battlefield with lamps. Sanjaya described how the warriors took up blazing torches, casting a warm glow over the dark landscapes. The lights spread across the battlefield. The armies transformed into a dazzling spectacle of color and movement. The Kaurava forces, led by Drona, shone like stars in their golden armor, while the Pandavas, led by Arjula's son, sparkled with a fierce determination. The gods themselves seemed to join in the fray as Gandharvas, Dikshas, Rishis, and Apsaras descended upon the battlefield. The air was filled with the sound of darts flying through the air, the thunder of elephants trumpeting, and the clash of steel on steel. Sanjaya's words painted a picture of breathtaking beauty and terror, as if the very fabric of reality had been torn apart once more. In this whirlwind of chaos and destruction, one figure stood out: Aswathaman, a high-souled Brahmana, who wielded his fiery energy like a scorching sun. His presence seemed to ignite. The sun had set on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the assembled armies of the Pandavas and Kauravas. The air was thick with tension as the two forces faced each other, their hearts ablaze with determination and fury. Sanjaya, the charioteer of King Dhritarashtra, stood at his side watching the unfolding dramas. The darkness deepened. The lamps, set up on golden stands lit by fragrant oil, cast a warm, ethereal light over the battlefield. The earth itself seemed to be ablaze, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart by the clash of steel on steel. Elephants and horsemen, car warriors and infantry, all engaged in a frenzy of combat, their cries and roars echoing through the night air. At the forefront of the battle, Arjuna, the Pandava prince, rode into the fray with his chariot wheels blazing like stars in the darkness. His arrows flew swift and true, striking down Kauravas left and right as he wove a path of destruction through their ranks. Drona, the venerable preceptor, fought alongside him, his lances flashing like lightning as he battled on. But amidst the chaos and carnage, Sanjaya's thoughts turned to the minds of those who watched from the sidelines. What was the state of Dhritarashtra's mind, seeing his son Duryodhana leading the charge? Who were the brave warriors who protected Drola's flanks and rear? And what of Trishtadyumna, the son of Drupada, who had been tasked with defeating the great preceptor? As Sanjaya pondered these questions, he turned to recount the events of that fateful night. Duryodhana, determined to protect his mentor, had gathered a select group of brave warriors around him: Vikrana, Kshatrishna, Sabharsva, and Dirghava, among others. Together they formed a phalanx of protection around Drona, urging the preceptor forward as he charged into the fray. The battle raged on, with neither side giving quarter. Arjuna's arrows flew thick and fast, striking down Kaurava after Kaurava, while Dra's lances sliced through the Pandava ranks like scythes. The earth shook beneath their feet as the two armies clashed, their cries and roars mingling in a deafening cacophonious. The night wore on. The battle showed no signs of abating. Sanjaya watched with a heavy heart, knowing that the fate of the Kauravas hung precariously in the balance. Would Duryodhana's plan succeed, or would the might of the Pandavas prove too great to overcome? Only time would tell, as the two armies clashed on, their destinies intertwined like the threads of a mighty tape. The night was dark and foreboding, the air thick with tension as the armies clashed in a frenzy of steel and fury. King Yudhishthira, son of Dharma, stood tall on his chariot, surveying the chaos before him. He addressed his troops, the Panchalas, Samakas, and Pandavas, his voice carrying above the din of war proceed against Drona. Alone he commanded, his eyes burning with determination. "Let us slay him!" The Panchalas and Samakas surged forward, their war cries echoing through the night as they attacked Drona, the great charioteer. Our army, fueled by rage and battle lust, charged into the fray, our chariots crashing against theirs with a deafening crash. Kritavarman, son of Phrydika, was among them, his face twisted and furied as he targeted Yudhishthira himself. The king's brother Sahadeva rode towards Drona, arrows flying from his bow like a deadly rain. Bhima, the mighty warrior, advanced on his chariot, his massive form a force to be reckoned with. Duryodhana king of the Kuros, hurled himself at Bimisna, their chariots crashing together in a shower of steel, and thus Nectulus, son of Madrai, was also engaged, his arrows flying straight and true as he battled against Saikani's son Skripa, son of Saradwa, faced off against Saikandan, the two warriors locked in a fierce duelis. The battle raged on. Elephant riders clashed with each other, their massive forms crashing into one another like Titans horsemen rode. Forth lances and swords flashing in the moonlight as they charged at each other with a deafening cry. Men fell left and right, slaughtered by the hundreds, their bodies strewn across the battlefield like autumn leaves. Yudhishthira's chariot was surrounded, Kritavarman targeting him with arrow after arrow. But the king would not be defeated so easily. With a fierce cry, he pierced Kritavarman through his arms and chest with 10 arrows, sending the warrior stumbling back. The battle raged on each side, trading blows and counterattacks. Yudhishthira's armor was cut off by Kritavarman's shafts, but still he fought on, taking up a fierce lance to strike at the warrior. But even that was no match for Kritavarman's skill, who cut it in two with ease. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Yudhishthira retreated from battle, his armor lost and his chariot destroyed. The mighty car warrior Kritavarman had emerged victorious. But the cost of that victory was high indeed. Drola's chariot wheels still turned. In the midst of the great war, a fire still unfolded between two mighty warriors, Satyaki, the grandson of Sinai, and Uriah, Kuru warrior. The battlefield was abuzz with tension as these two Titans clashed their bows, singing with every shotus. The battle raged on. Satyaki pierced the Uriah in the chest with 5 keen shafts, causing his blood to flow freely in rage. The Uriah retaliated by piercing Satyaki with 10 swift arrows, and the two warriors began to exchange blows, each trying to outmaneuver the other. Their arrow showers were like a deluge raining down on each other in an unrelenting torrent. The air was filled with the scent of blood and swayed as they clashed their bows, straining under the weight of their fury. For a moment it seemed that neither could gain the upper hand, but then Satyaki's rage at its peak cut off Uriah's bow with a swift stroke. Uriah, however, was not one to be easily defeated. He quickly took up another bow and shot 9 arrows at Satyaki, who lodged in defiance as he charged forward. The battle raged on, each warrior matching the other blow for blow, until finally Uriah fell from his chariot, pierced by a swift dartus. Uriah lay wounded as Swathaman, Drona's son, and one of the greatest warriors of the Kauravas, rushed into the fray with eyes blazing like copper and fury. He hurled himself at Satyaki, showering him with arrows that seemed to come from now where the battle was intense, each warrior exchanging blows, their bows singing as they clashed. The duel between Swathaman and Gatotkaca, the Rakshasa, son of Hedimva, was just as fierce. Swathaman shot arrow after arrow at Gatotkaca, but the Rakshasa's strength and agility allowed him to dodge each blow with ease. The battle raged on, their arrows flying back and forth like a deadly dance scene. Another part of the battlefield, Emma, the mighty son of Vayu, clashed with Duryodhana. The Kaurava king, their bows sang as they exchanged blows, each trying to outmaneuver the other. Duryodhana shot arrow after arrow at Emma, but the Pandava warrior was not easily defeated. With a fierce cry, Emma hurled an iron dart at Duryodhana, striking him with great force. The Kaurava king stumbled back, his bow broken, and for a moment it seemed that Bhima had gained the upper hand. But Duryodhana quickly took up another bow, and the battle raged on us. The duel between Swathaman and Gatotkaca reached its climax. The two warriors clashed in. The battle raged on, with warriors clashing in a frenzy of steel and arrows. Sanjaya watched as Karna, the son of Vaikartna, faced off against Sahadeva, the mighty car warrior from Panchala. Their encounter was a spectacle to behold, with both men exchanging blows and neither gaining the upper hand. Karna's prowess on the battlefield was evident as he pierced Sahadeva with 9 shafts, sending him stumbling back. But Sahadeva refused to yield, and with a fierce determination he launched himself at Karna once more. This time he struck true, piercing Karna with 9 stray arrows that seemed to come from now where the crowd held its collective breath as the two warriors clashed their movements. Lightning fast, Karna's response was swift and merciless. With 100 straight shafts he pierced Sahadeva, sending him reeling back. Then with a deft flick of his wrist he cut off the latter's straight bow, rendering it useless. Sahadeva, undeterred, took up another bow and launched himself at Karna once more. This time he managed to land 20 arrows on the son of Feet that sent shockwaves through the assembled warriors. But even as Sahadeva seemed to gain the upper hand, Karna was unfazed. With a quick flick of his wrist He slew Sahedeva steeds with many straight shafts, sending them crashing to the ground. The latter's driver was next dispatched to Yamazabad by a broad-headed shaft that left no doubt as to its intentions ahead of Carless, and bereft of his bow took up a sword and shield in desperation. But Karna was relentless, cutting off both with ease, sending Sahedeva stumbling back. The latter's eyes blazed with fury as he hurled himself at Karna once more, this time wielding a heavy mass decked with gold. The crowd watched in awe as the two warriors clashed, their movements lightning fast and unpredictable. But even as Sahedeva seemed to gain momentum, Karna was one step ahead. With his shafts, he cut off the mass, sending it crashing to the ground. Sahedeva hurled a dart at Karna next, but the latter's reflexes were quick, and with a swift motion, he cut it down. Enraged beyond reason, Sahedeva leaped from his chariot and took up a carved wheel, hurling it at Karna with all his might. But even this did not deter the Suta's son, who with many thousands of arrows sliced through the wheel like the city of death itself. The crowd gasped in amazement as Sahedeva, his eyes blazing with fury, hurled a storm of shafts at Karna. The car traces, yokes limbs of elephants and steed. The sun was setting over the battle-scarred landscape as Sanjaya watched the drama unfold before his eyes. The ruler of Madras, with his clouds of shafts, had surrounded Virata and his troops, who were making their way swiftly to confront Drona. The air was electric with tension as these two great bowmen faced off against each other. The battle that ensued was like a reenactment of the legendary duel between Vala and Vasava in days of yore. The ruler of Madras struck Virata with 100 straight shafts, but the king retaliated with 9 keen arrows, followed by 370 more, and then another 100 as the fight raged on. The ruler of Madras cut down the 4 steeds that were yoked to Virata's chariot, leaving him stranded. But Virata refused to yield. With a fierce cry, he leaped from his car and drew his bow, shooting keen shafts at his attacker. The ruler of Madras was undaunted, however, and continued to rain arrows upon the king, just as it seemed that the battle would be decided in favor of the ruler of Madras. Satanaka, Virata's brother, rode up on his chariot ready to join the fray. The ruler of Madras, however, had other plans. With a swift motion, he pierced Satanaka with many shafts, sending him tumbling to the ground. The sight of his brother falling was too much for Virata, and with a fierce cry, he leaped out of the fall and Hera's chariot ready to continue the battle. The king sat on the chariot, surrounded by standard and garlands. He opened his eyes wide, filled with wrath and determination. With renewed vigor, he shot weight arrows at the ruler of Madras' chariot. But the latter was not one to be easily defeated. He struck back with 100 straight shafts, piercing Virata in the chest. The king sat down on the terrace of his chariot, wounded, and swooning away. His driver, seeing him mangled by arrows, bore him away from the battlefield. The troops that had been fighting alongside Virata fled in disarray, pursued by the ruler of Madras. Arrows as night began to fall, Vasudeva and Dhananjaya, Arjuna, advanced towards the spot where Salya was stationed. But before they could reach him, a new challenger emerged on the scene. Valamvasha, a prince of the Rakshasas, riding on a chariot harnessed with 8 steeds, his face a terrifying sight to behold. The battle that ensued between Arjuna and Valamvasha was fierce and wondrous. The two warriors exchanged blows, their arrows flying through the air like a tempest. But in the end it was Arjuna who emerged victorious, cutting off Valam. The sun beat down on the battlefield as the armies clashed to a frenzy of steel and arrows. Sanjaya watched with keen eyes as the warriors fought for their lives. In one corner of the field, Chitrasna, son of Dhritarashtra, faced off against Nakula's son, Satanaka. The two warriors exchanged blows, each landing several hits on the other. Satanaka pierced Chitrasna with 5 arrows, but the latter quickly retaliated, striking Satanaka with 9 keen shafts in the chest. The two warriors seemed evenly matched, their armor dented and their bodies battered from the constant barrage of arrows. But then Satanaka's superior skill became apparent as he cut off Chitrasna's armor with many straight shafts. Divested of his armor, Chitrasna looked beautiful, like a snake shedding its load at the right season. He took up another bow and began to strike back at Satanaka, but the latter was relentless, cutting down Chitrasna's standard, and then his bow. The mighty car warrior, however, quickly picked up another bow capable of piercing every foot. Battle raged on with neither side giving an inch. Nakula's son cut off Chitrasna's 4 steeds and their driver, but the latter jumped down from his car and continued to afflict Satanaka with arrows. In the final blow, Nakula's son struck Chitrasna's gold-decked bow while it was still in use. The dust settled. Sanjaya turned his attention to another part of the field, where Vrishasna, Karna's son, clashed with Drupada, the mighty car warrior. The two warriors exchanged blows, each landing several hits on the other. Yejnisna pierced Rishizna in the arms and chest with 60 arrows, but the latter quickly retaliated, striking Yejnisna in the center of his chest with many shafts. The spectacle was one of beauty and terror as the two warriors, mangled by arrows, looked like a couple of porcupines with their quills erect, bathed in blood from the wounds caused by the straight arrows. They seemed to radiate an otherworldly glow like two kulpa trees or kinsuks rich with flowery burdens. Rishezna continued to exchange blows with Drupada, eventually piercing him with 9 and then 70 arrows. But Drupada refused to yield, cutting off Rishezna's bow into 2 fragments. With a broad-headed arrow taking up another bow, he drew out a strong, wet, and well-tempered arrow and aimed it at Vrish's nest. The battle raged on. Sanjaya watched as Dasezana, Dhritarashtra's son, clashed with Prativandaya, a mighty car warrior. The two warriors exchanged blows, each landing several hits on. The sun was setting on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the chaos of clashing steel and thundering hoofs. Sanjaya watched with bated breath as Nakula, the brave son of Madrai, faced off against Sekanai, the cunning son of Suvalas. The two warriors drew their bows, their eyes locked in a fire stare. Wait, wait, Sekanai shouted, his voice carrying across the battlefield. But Nakula was undeterred, and with a swift motion, he loosed an arrow that struck its mark on Sekanai's armor. The sound of clashing steel echoed through the air as the two warriors exchanged blow for blow. The battle raged on, each warrior matching the other's skill and ferocity. Their armor was pierced by arrows, but they refused to yield. They moved with a fluidity that belied their wounds, like two beautiful kulpa trees swaying in the wind. The air was filled with the scent of sweat and blood as they clashed, their eyes blazing with fury. And then in a flash of steel, Sekanai struck true. A barbed arrow pierced Nakula's chest, sending him crashing to the ground. Sanjaya watched in horror as the brave warrior lay motionless on his chariot, but Nakula was not one to be defeated so easily. He struggled back to consciousness, his eyes blazing with a fire's determination. With a mighty roar, he launched himself at Sekanai, showering him with arrows that struck true again and again. The son of Silvala stumbled backward, his bow shattered by Nakula's relentless onslaughts. The battle raged on. Other warriors joined the fray. Sikandin, the brave son of Panchala, clashed with Kripa, the wise preceptor. Their bows sang out as they exchanged blow for blow, their arrows flying through the air like the deadly rain. The sound of clashing steel grew louder, and the battlefield became a maelstrom of chaos and night, war lit only by the flickering lamps on chariots and elephants. The warriors fought on, their faces illuminated by the soft glow, but their hearts fueled by a fierce determination to emerge victorious. Sanjaya watched in awe as the battle raged on, his heart heavy with the knowledge that even in the midst of chaos there was beauty to be found. The night wore on. The warriors began to tire, their armor was battered and bruised, their bodies weary from the relentless onslaught. But still they fought on, driven by a fierce will to survive. And as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the battle finally began to subside. The warriors stumbled backward, exhausted but unbroken, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that in this dreadful nocturnal encounter even friends had become enemies. In the midst of a fierce and terrible battle, Trishadyama, the prince of Panchala, charged towards Drona, the renowned preceptor, with his formidable bow and arrows. As he approached, Drona's chariot adorned with gold, the Panchalas and Pandavas surrounded him, eager to aid their teacher in battle. Trishadyama, undeterred by the multitude of warriors against him, pierced Drona with fire's swift arrows, unleashing a mighty roar. However, Drona countered with 25 arrows, cutting off Trishadyama's bow with another broad-headed arrow. Enraged, Trishadyama cast aside his broken bow and bit his lip in fury. With a new bow at the ready, he shot a devastating shaft capable of taking Drona's life. The arrow illuminated the entire army like the rising sun, striking fear into the hearts of all who beheld it. However, Karna, displaying his unmatched skill with his bow, swiftly cut down the shaft into a dozen fragments. As it hurtled towards Drona's chariot, the battle raged on, with Trishadyama facing off against 7 mighty warriors: Drona's son Drona, himself Salya, Dasezana, Sekanai, and Karna. Despite being pierced by their arrows, Trishadyama retaliated with equal ferocity, striking each of them down with 3 swift arrows. As the battle intensified, Drumasna joined the fray, firing a winged arrow that pierced Trishtadyuma's armor. However, Trishtadyuma swiftly counterattacked, piercing Drumisna with 3 golden-tipped arrows and ultimately beheading him with another broad-headed shaft. Meanwhile, Satyakite, the mighty warrior from the Desert clan, arrived on the scene, scattering his arrows as he charged towards Trishtadyuma, Radha's son Karna. Pierced Satyakite with 10 swift arrows, but the latter retaliated by striking Karna with 10 shafts of his own. Encounter between Satyakite and Karna was a spectacle to behold, reminiscent of the legendary battle between Valai and Vasava. In ancient times, the 2 warriors clashed their bows, twining as they exchanged arrow for arrow. Duryodhana, another warrior from the Desert clan, also joined the fray, shrouding Karna with his arrows as the battle raged on. Duryodhana, the king's son, rallied his troops and attacked Satyakite from all sides. However, Satyakite resisted their onslaught, piercing Vrishasna in the chest and ultimately cutting off both Karna and his son's lead and fences and bows, just as it seemed at the tide of. The battle raged on like a tempest to a storm as the armies clashed in the dead of night. Sanjaya watched with bated breath as the mighty Kar warriors of the Kaurava army charged towards Duryodhana. Satyakite, the Sattva herald, their cars adorned with gold and jewels, thundered across the battlefield accompanied by cavalry and elephants. The air was filled with the cacophony of leoning roars as the warriors challenged Duryodhana, determined to slay him. The grandson of Sinai, invincible in battle, responded with fury, unleashing a torrent of arrows that cut down many of his opponents. His razor-faced arrows sliced through the trunks of elephants and the necks of horses, sending them crashing to the ground. The battlefield was soon strewn with the bodies of fallen warriors. Their yet tails and white umbrellas scattered about like autumn leaves as the night wore on the earth, trembled beneath the feet of the combatants. Duryodhana, the firm bowman, rushed towards Duryodhana, but was pierced by a dozen blood-drinking shafts shot from Madhava's Arjuna's bow. In rage, Duryodhana retaliated with 10 arrows, but Duryodhana remained unscathed. Meanwhile, the battle between the Panchalas and the Kauravas raged on, presenting a spectacle of unparalleled ferocity. Satyakite, displaying his great lightness of hand, cut down many of the enemy warriors, their cars and bows shattered by his swift arrows. The grandson of Sinai then dispatched Duryodhana's steeds to Yamazabad, leaving him stranded on a car without a bow. The night wore darker. Satyakite, the cunning strategist, surrounded Arjuna with thousands of cars and elephants. He hurled celestial weapons at the Pandava hero, but Arjuna, enraged by the challenge, checked their advance with his keen arrows. Suvala's son pierced Arjuna with 20 shafts, but was ultimately slain by the slayer of Phus. The earth became a battleground, strewn with lopped-off arrows and dead bodies. The air was filled with the wails of the slaughtered warriors, their cries echoing through the night like the shrieks of ghosts in hell. In this fierce hour of darkness, Arjuna vanquished his enemies, dispatching Satyakite's 4 steeds to Yamazabad. The battle raged on. Trishtadyuma pierced Drona with 3 arrows, cutting off his bowstring and sending him to retrieve another. The Grinder of Kshatriyas, however, responded with 5 arrows, piercing Trishtadyuma and his driver. But the mighty Kar warrior refused to yield, routing the Kaurava hosts like Mahabharat. The sun had set on the battlefield, casting a dark shadow over the carnage. The once mighty army of Duryodhana, son of Dhritarashtra, lay scattered and broken, their brave warriors slaughtered by the illustrious heroes of the Pandavas. Amidst this chaos, Duryodhana's voice echoed through the night air as he hurled words at his father's most trusted generals, Karna and Drona. Have you too abandoned me? Duryodhana thundered, his rage like a tempest. You said you would vanquish the sons of Pandu in battle. If that was your intention, why did you not tell me? So I would never have provoked this war with the Parthas if I had known otherwise. Karna and Drona, those 2 bulls among men, were pierced by Duryodhana's words. Like a goad, they roared in fury, their faces ablaze with anger as they charged into battle once more. The great bowman Drona, the foremost of all wielders of weapons, was the first to strike down Satyakite, grandson of Sinai, piercing him with 10 arrows. Karna and Vrishasna followed suit, each striking their foe with deadly precision. The battlefield became a maelstrom of chaos as the 2 armies clashed in the darkness. The Samaikas, those skilled warriors, showered Drona with arrows from every side, but he stood firm, his rage like a raging storm. He cut down Kshatriyas left and right his sword, slicing through their armor like a hot knife through butter as the night wore on. The Panchalas were slaughtered by Drona's relentless onslaught. Some fled in terror, abandoning their loved ones to save their own lives. Others, driven mad with grief, charged headlong into Drona's path, only to meet their maker. The darkness was filled with the cries of the dying and the wails of the bereaved in this midst of chaos. Janardana, Krishna, beheld the flight of his friends and allies. He called out to Arjuna, urging him to rally the troops and face Drona and Karna once more. And so, as the night wore on, the two armies clashed in a frenzy of steel and blood. Just when it seemed that all was lost, that mighty warrior rallied his troops and charged into battle alongside Arjuna and Krishna. The three of them approached Drona and Karna, their swords flashing in the dim light. The outcome of the battle hung precariously in the balance as the two armies clashed once more. So the night wore on, a maelstrom of chaos and destruction with no end in sight. The sun had set over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the chaos that unfolded before it. The clash of steel on steel, the thunder of hoofs, and the cries of the fallen filled the air as Karna, the Sur's son, rode into battle like a stormy tempest. He galloped towards Prishetta's son Trishtadyumna. The Panchala prince fired 5 swift arrows that pierced Karna's armor, but Karna, unfazed by the attack, responded with 10 razor sharp shafts that struck Trishtadyumna with deadly precision. The two warriors danced around each other, exchanging blows and counter blows as their bows sang out in a symphony of death. The battle raged on, with neither side giving an inch. Karna's driver and steeds fell to the ground, but he continued to ride into the fray, his bow singing out as he fired arrow after arrow at Trishtadyumna and his retinue. The Panchala prince leaped from his chariot, grasping a mighty mass in his hand, and charged towards Karna with a fierce battle cry. The two warriors clashed, their bows sang out in perfect harmony, each one firing arrows that seemed to dance on the wind. But Karna's aim was true, and he struck Trishtadyumna's steeds from under him, sending them crashing to the ground. The Panchala prince stumbled back, but his spirit remained unbroken. Meanwhile, Yudhishthira watched the battle unfold with growing concern. His army was fleeing in terror, unable to withstand Karna's onslaught. He turned to Arjuna and Krishna, his voice filled with urgency. Behold, my friends, Karna is a force of nature, scorching everything around him like the blazing sun itself. We must act quickly or risk losing all that we hold dear. Krishna nodded in agreement, his eyes fixed on Karna as he rode into battle like a lion. But Arjuna hesitated, remembering the words of Vasudeva, who had warned him that this was not the right time to confront Karnas. The night wore on, the battle raged on with no end in sight. The Panchalas and Samikas fled in terror, their cries echoing through the darkness as they fell before Karna's mighty arrows. But then a new figure appeared on the horizon, Ghatotkacha, the Rakshasa son of Bhima. Ghatotkacha was a warrior unlike any other, born with celestial powers and armed with divine weapons. He rode towards Karna with a fierce battle cry, his eyes blazing with a fire that seemed to consume everything in its path. I am here, he shouted, his voice echoing through the night air. Command Mekrish. The sun had just begun to set on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the armies of the Kurus, and the Pandavas. Duryodhana, determined to protect his only Karna, addressed Dasajana, the Rakshasa. Ghatotkacha is advancing rapidly towards Karna, driven by his own prowess in battle. Resist him, my brother. Surround yourself with a mighty force and proceed to where Karna is fighting against the Rakshasa. Meanwhile, Jadajura's son Alamvashat approached Duryodhana, his eyes blazing with ambition. O king, he said, I long to slay the Pandavas, those warriors who have defeated my father in battle. I wish to offer their blood and flesh to my sire as an offering of worship. Duryodhana's face lit up with delight at the prospect of having a powerful, only like Alamvasha, go forth Alamvasha, he said, and slay Ghatotkacha in battle. He is a Rakshasa, born of man, devoted to the welfare of the Pandavas, and always causing destruction among our ranks. Alamvasha nodded his head, eager to prove himself. As the two armies clashed, Ghatotkacha began to wreak havoc on the Kuru host, his illusions and powers sending them fleeing in terror. The great warrior was like a storm cloud pouring down arrows upon the Kurus. With unrelenting ferocity, Alamvasha, enraged by Ghatotkacha's attacks, charged forward with fists flying. But Ghatotkacha stood firm, his mountain-like strength Unshaky with battle between these two gins of Rakshasas was a spectacle to behold. They fought like Indra and Vairocana on their powers of delusion. Making them seem invincible, they transformed into fire and a scene Garuda and Taichaka, cloud and tempest, thunder and mountain, each manifestation more terrifying than the last. In the end it was Ghatotkacha who emerged victorious, his strength and cunning proving too much for Alambushya. With a swift blow he struck off the Rakshasa's head, which still roared with fury as it fell to the ground. Smiling triumphantly, Ghatotkacha approached Duryodhana's chariot and hurled the bloodied head at the king's feet. "Behold, O King," Ghatotkacha said, his voice like thunder in the season of rains, "your Oli is slain. You will soon see Karna fall to my might. Remember, a just ruler should never see a king a Brahmana or a woman with empty hands." With these words he turned towards Karna, shooting arrow after arrow at the human warrior. The battle that ensued between Ghatotkacha and Karna. It was a dark and ominous night, the kind that made even the bravest warriors tremble. The battle between Karna, son of Vaikartna, and Ghatotkacha, the monstrous Rakshasa, had begun. Dhritarashtra, king of Hastinapura, summoned his wise advisor Sanjaya to describe the terrifying encounter. Sanjaya began by painting a vivid picture of Ghatotkacha's appearance. His eyes were blood-red, his face copper-hued, and his belly sunken. The bristles on his body pointed upwards like quills, and his head was a deep green. His ears were long and sharp like arrows, and his cheekbones high and prominent. His mouth stretched from ear to ear, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Ghatotkacha's tongue and lips were long and coppery, and his brows reached far outwards. The Rakshasa's body was a deep blue with a red neck that seemed to glow in the dark. He stood tall as a hill, his gigantic frame and arms radiating an air of power and might. The hair on his head was tied upwards in a frightful shape, and his hips were large and prominent. Ghatotkacha wore a cuirass like a circle of fire on his breast, adorned with golden ornaments that shone brightly in the dark. As Sanjaya continued to describe the Rakshasa's appearance, he revealed that Ghatotkacha rode a massive chariot covered in bear skins and equipped with 100 tinkling bells. The standard on the chariot waved numerous blood-red banners, and the steeds were like infuriated elephants, their eyes red with fury. The battle between Karna and Ghatotkacha was fierce and intense, with both warriors exchanging blows that shook the earth. They pierced each other's bodies with shafts, scorching each other with clouds of arrows. The combatants on the battlefield trembled with fear as the two mighty car warriors clashed. Ghatotkacha invoked a celestial illusion, summoning a large force of Rakshasas to surround Karna. But the Sutta son was not intimidated and continued to fight bravely. He destroyed Ghatotkacha's illusion with his shafts, piercing the Rakshasa's vital parts and filling him with rage. In a desperate bid to defeat Karna, Ghatotkacha hurled a celestial wheel at the Sutta son, but Karna was ready for him and cut the wheel into pieces with his shafts. Enraged by this failure, Ghatotkacha showed Karna with arrows, but the Sutta son fearlessly countered each shot. As the battle raged on, the combatants fled in terror, leaving only Karna and Ghatotkacha to fight on. The outcome of the battle was far from certain, as the sun was setting on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the chaos that had erupted between Kura's army and the Rakshasas. Amidst the din of clashing steel and the cries of the wounded, Sanjaya watched as Alayuta, the valiant prince of Rakshasas, emerged onto the field. Alayuta was a towering figure, surrounded by a large force of his kin, each one more terrifying than the last. His eyes blazed with fury as he recalled the old quarrel that had driven him to this moment. His kinsmen Vaka and Karmira, who had delighted in devouring Brahmanas, lay slain at the hands of Bhima, and Hidubha, a Rakshasa maiden who had been deflowered by Bhima, still lingered in his mind like an open wound. As Alayuta approached Duryodhana's command post, he was met with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The king listened intently as Alayuta recounted the wrongs done to him and his kin at the hands of Bhima. His voice grew louder, more urgent, as he vowed to slay not just Bhima, but all his followers, steeds, cars, and elephants. Duryodhana's face lit up with excitement as he accepted Alayuta's offer. "Place yourself in the van," he said, "and we will fight the foe together." The king's troops, emboldened by their leader's words, surged forward to join the fray. As Alayuta led his forces in a battle, Sanjaya marveled at the sheer spectacle of it all. The prince rode a car that shone like the sun itself, its rattle thundering through the air as it bore him towards the enemy lines. His steeds, massive and fierce, moved with a speed and power that was almost supernatural. Aleuda's armor glinted in the fading light, adorned with blazing engatus and diadems that seemed to burn with an inner fire. His face was twisted with rage, his eyes flashing like lightning as he charged into the heart of the Pandava army. Sanjaya watched in awe as Aleuda clashed with the principal kings of the Pandavas, their swords ringing out against each other as they fought for dominance on the battlefield. The air was filled with the scent of blood and sweat. The sound of clashing steel echoing through the night air. Was a battle for the ages, one that would be remembered long after the sun had risen again over the horizon. The battlefield was ablaze with activity as Aleuda, the formidable warrior from the Kaurava army, charged into battle. The sight of him sent a surge of excitement through the ranks of the Kauravas, who felt invigorated and reborn like men emerging from the depths of death itself. As the battle raged on, the Panchalas and other Kshatriyas watched with bated breath as Aleuda clashed with Ghatotkaca's son. The two warriors were evenly matched, their prowess incomparable, and to all who witnessed it, Aleuda was known for his incredible strength and speed, while Ghatotkaca possessed the power of illusion. The Kauravas, led by Duryodhana, watched with growing unease as Bhima's son seemed to gain the upper hand against their champion. Duryodhana knew that if Aleuda fell, it would be a devastating blow to their army. Summoning Aleuda, he urged him to slay Ghatotkaca and restore their fortunes. With renewed determination, Aleuda charged at Ghatotkaca, who was not one to back down from a challenge. The two warriors clashed in a spectacular display of martial prowess, their arrows and masses flying through the air as they exchanged blows. It seemed as though neither could gain the upper hand, each warrior's strength matched by the others. As the battle raged on, Bhima himself entered the fray, disregarding Karna's approach and rushing towards Aleuda. The prince of Rakshasas was caught off guard, but he quickly regained his composure and began to exchange blows with Bhima. The two warriors were evenly matched, their strength and speed pushing each other to new heights. The other Rakshasas, inspired by their leader's bravery, joined the fray, attacking Bhima from all sides. But the mighty warrior was not one to be defeated easily. With his keen arrows, he pierced each of them with 5 whetted shafts, sending them fleeing in terror. As the battle reached its climax, Aleuda and Ghatotkaca clashed once more, their masses meeting in a resounding crash that sent shockwaves through the earth. The two warriors exchanged blows, their strength and speed pushing each other to new heights. It seemed as though neither could gain the upper hand, each warrior's determination matched by the other's dust. When it seemed as though Aleuda might emerge victorious, Bhima seized a new mass and charged at him once more. The battle that followed was fierce and intense, with both warriors exchanging blows in a spectacular display of martial prowess. In the end, it was Krishna who intervened, dispatching Ghatotkaca to protect Bhima. As the dust settled, the Kauravas were left reeling. The sun was setting on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the chaos. Sanjaya watched in awe as Ghatotkaca, the mighty son of Hidimba, clashed with Aleuda, a formidable Rakshasa and brother of Vaka. The two cannibals were locked in a fierce battle, their roars echoing through the night air. Meanwhile, Vasudeva, the wise and powerful leader, approached Ghatotkaca and whispered words of counsel in his ear. "Behold, O mighty armed one," he said, "Bhima is violently assailed by the Rakshasa in battle in the very sight of all the troops, and of this self, though of great splendor, abandoning Karna. For the present, quickly slay Aleuda, O mighty armed one, thou can afterwards slay Karna." Ghatotkaca listened intently to Vasudeva's words, his eyes burning with determination. He abandoned his focus on Karna and turned his attention to Aleuda. The battle between the two cannibals raged on, their blows shaking the earth as Ghatotkaca fought the Pandavas, and Panchalas launched a fierce attack against Aleuda's warriors. Satyakai, the diadem-decked Vivetsu, shot arrows on all sides, overthrowing many of Kshatriya's. Bhima, enraged by the slaughter of his comrades, rushed towards Karna, shooting shafts in rapid succession. The battle was a maelstrom of chaos and destruction. Trees crashed to the ground as warriors clashed with spears and swords. The air was filled with the scent of blood and sweat. Ghatotkaca fought valiantly, but Aleuda's sheer strength and ferocity kept him at bay. Just when it seemed that Aleuda would emerge victorious, Ghatotkaca unleashed a mighty roar and hurled his gold-decked mass adorned with 100 bells. The mass crushed the steed's driver and car of Aleuda, sending him crashing to the ground. Aleuda retaliated by creating an illusion, pouring a copious shower of blood that seemed to darken the sky. But Ghatotkaca was not fooled. He countered with his own illusion, dispelling Aleuda's trickery and sending the Rakshasa stumbling back. The battle raged on, with both sides exchanging blows and counter-blows. The clash of trees and mountain summits echoed through the night air, sounding like the roar of driving thunder. It was a battle for the age is reminiscent of the legendary conflict between Vala and Sugriva, two princes among the monkeys. In the end it was Gatotkaca who emerged victorious, his mighty strength and cunning proving too much for Aleud. The night battle raged on with Gatotkaca, the mighty Rakshasa, son of Hidimba, standing at the forefront of the Kaurava army. His father's death had filled him with delight, and he now reveled in the chess he had unleashed upon the battlefield with a loud roar. He stood tall like a hill, his strength rivaled only by that of a prince of mountains as the battle raged on Karna. The sun emerged as a formidable force against Gatotkaca. His bows sang with a deep and resonant twine, while his cartwheels rattled with a thunderous roar. The welkin itself seemed to come alive, filled with the flashes of lightning like arrows and the showers of shafts that rained down upon the battlefield. Gatotkaca, enraged by Karna's relentless onslaught, invoked a powerful illusion into existence. A dark cloud resembling a blazing fire erupted in the sky, sending forth a torrent of darts, lances, clubs, and other deadly projectiles. The air itself seemed to come alive with the cries of jackals and the yells of Rakshasas, their forms huge as hills stationed in the welkin. The Kerala warriors, terrified by this display of Gatotkaca's powers, were struck and crushed beneath the onslaught of these fire-swept ones. Brave warriors fell to the ground, their arms broken or loosened from their grasp, while steeds and elephants and cars crashed to the earth. Amidst the chaos, the carnage continued unabated. The Kerala troops suddenly broke and fled with speed, crying out in despair that all was lost. Flee, eat Kauravas, all is lost, they shouted, as if the gods themselves were slaying them for the sake of the Pandavas. In that moment there was no one to rescue the Para troops from their fight. A night battle had become a maelstrom of chaos and destruction, with Gatotkaca's illusion at its center. The warriors on both sides fought on, but it seemed as though the very gods themselves were involved in this conflict, their divine powers unleashed upon the battlefield like a stormy tempest. The sun was setting on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the carnage. Sanjaya's words echoed through the air as he beheld the Pandavas' grief-stricken faces. Hidimba's son lay lifeless, his body broken like a shattered mountain. The brothers wept uncontrollably, their tears mingling with the dust of battle. But amidst this sorrow one figure stood apart. Vasudeva, Krishna, the divine prince who had been a constant source of comfort and guidance to Arjuna. His eyes shone with an otherworldly light as he beheld the Pandavas' distress. With a mighty roar, like a lion breaking free from its cage, he leaped into action. Krishna's arms enveloped Arjuna in a fierce bear hug, his voice booming through the air as he let out a thunderous shout. He danced with reckless abandon, his feet pounding the earth. Like a tempest-ravaged tree, the wind whipped through his locks as he spun around, his eyes aglow with an inner fire. Arjuna's heart was heavy with grief, but he could not help but be drawn into Krishna's infectious joy as they danced together. The air seemed to vibrate with an electric energy. Sanjaya watched in awe as the two friends moved in perfect harmony, their bond stronger than any sword or shield. But Arjuna's sorrow eventually broke through the surface of his emotions. He approached Krishna, his eyes brimming with tears, and asked him to explain the reason behind his uncharacteristic joy. Krishna, why do you rejoice at a time when our brother has fallen, our troops are fleeing in terror, and we are all filled with anxiety? What is it that fills your heart with such lightness? Krishna's smile was like a sunrise breaking over the horizon. He took Arjuna by the hand and began to speak in hushed tones, his words dripping with honeyed sweetness. Arjuna, my child, I have news for you. Karna, that fearsome warrior, has been slain in battle. His dart, which had caused so much destruction, was foiled by Gatotkaca's bravery. But what you do not know is that Karna's natural armor and earrings were taken away from him by Indra himself using an illusion. Krishna's eyes sparkled with a mischievous glint as he continued to speak. Karna may seem invincible, but without his armor and earrings, he is like a man, not a god. And I have seen the signs. When his chariot wheels sink into the earth, that will be your chance to strike him down. Do not hesitate, my friend, for you are the only one who can vanquish him in battle. Krishna spoke. The air seemed to grow lighter, as if a weight had been. The sun was setting over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the armies of the Pandavas and their enemies. The Kauravas. Arjuna, son of Pandu, approached his charioteer Janardana with a question on his mind. How, O Janardana? He asked where those lords of the earth, Jarasandha and others, slain. Janardana, also known as Vasudeva, smiled knowingly. If Jarasandha, the ruler of cheetahs, and the mighty son of Nishad. King had not been slain, they would have become terrible indeed. He said Duryodhana would have chosen them for his side, and together they would have protected Dhritarashtra's sons, like the gods protecting the celestial host. Arjuna listened intently as Janardana recounted the stories of their past battles. He spoke of Jarasandha, a Rakshasa made up of 2 halves of 1 child, who had been united by the Rakshasa woman Jara. That mask capable of slaying all creatures, Janardana said, was hurled towards us by Jarasandha in his wrath, but I, Valadev, countered it with my weapon.